Hey, everybody. Nick Livingston with the Honeit podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to Trevor Gamble on this week's episode of the Honeit podcast. Trevor and I have had some really great conversations over the years. He knows a lot about recruitment and talent acquisition, is currently the head of marketing at SBT, which is one of the longest running executive search firms focused on the semiconductor business. But, Trevor has cut his teeth in executive recruitment and talent acquisition, knows his stuff, and has a really incredible way of explaining complicated things. And I think that's where I love chatting with you, Trevor, is to kind of, we've come up with ideas and how do we explain this in simple, clear ways to get the point across. And you do that very succinctly. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. Today, I thought we'd kind of start off by talking a little bit about the candidate experience. I know this is something that you spend a lot of time thinking about at SBT. Maybe you could kick it off and just, when I say candidate experience in 2023 or 2024, let's look forward. What do candidates want? What are we looking for?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you, Nick. Thanks for the invitation, and always a pleasure to talk with you and ideate like this. So looking ahead to 2024, where do we begin in terms of what candidates want? Maybe I'll couch this just by starting with my opinions are my own and come through experience and still staying engaged in recruiting to an extent, though I am head of marketing, and also having conversations with the recruiters here and the recruiting leaders here on a daily basis, and talking with those outside the agency at other recruiting firms and agencies too about what they're experiencing. If we keep it at a high level for the beginning, I believe what candidates are really going to be looking for principally out of their experiences with recruiters, whether that's an internal recruiter at a single corporation or an agency recruiter representing multiple clients. Number one thing is going to be transparency/authenticity. And the reason I feel that to be true is because look at what we've just experienced in 2023, right? The rise of AI and the enablement of recruiters with all of these resources, toolkits that make it easy to engage on a large scale with reasonably tailored messaging. And that it's now into the public consciousness, right? So what that has done is had both a positive and somewhat of a negative effect, because I think candidates are now attuned to the fact that AI is out there. AI is out there, and wary be the recruiter who is trying to make things look almost too good. So that authenticity and transparency really is going to be at the forefront as in the year ahead.
I love it. I think you're right on. It's funny, the word of the year for 2023 from Webster, I think with Webster Dictionary, they release a few new words every year, but the number one word was authenticity or authentic. So I think you're spot on with, there's a giant theme out there around everyone's looking for a little truth. Everyone's recognizes how easy it is to create surface level content and things like that. But what's under the hood? What's next? How do you go a little bit deeper? And so I think that's very interesting. Where do you think that content or that authenticity comes from in recruitment in our day-to-day? Like, where does that happen? How do we extract that? How do we show that in a new way or better way?
That's a great question. And it's really many vectors, right? It can be at the front end of a recruiting process. Let's talk for a moment about how about engaging with a client. When an agency has gained a client and they're going to have that first job intake, it's encouraging, whether it's the account manager, whether it's the recruiter, a cooperative effort, engaging that hiring manager and other decision-making stakeholders in an authentic conversation. Hey, be really forthcoming. Like, what's the good? What's the bad? Because those stories are going to originate from the people closest to the action. So in my view, it really, really starts way upstream, if you will, with the client. So being able to capture those authentic stories and even guide the client side stakeholders to be forthcoming and to turn over those stones that they didn't really know existed. And then as we get further along in the process, it's now on the recruiter agency side of the equation, outreach. don't you think? I mean, being able to craft
how you're interacting with candidates, or what's that first touch, or what's that first email, or what's that first message.
right. Absolutely. Leveraging the myriad tools that recruiters have nowadays to make it relevant and personalized, yes, but also there's a fine line because recruiters infer a lot of information, a lot of things about candidates based on what we see, we read, we look at social profiles, we have data enrichment tools that we could almost, think we know who we're engaging with before we do it. But the reality is there are a lot of gaps. So being able to create first outreach, whether that be through a LinkedIn message, whether that be through commenting socially on a social media platform on something that person has posted, it could be a personal blog, all of these different channels, doing so in a really credible and authentic way that isn't sales forward, and it also isn't too assumptive. So you can kind of package that and say outreach.
Outreach, last 5 to 10 years. And again, recruitment technology in terms of outreach and sourcing, let's call it, has followed the tools of, say, marketers or salespeople in terms of identifying prospects, applying CRM or sequences or drip campaigns and trying to, but I think where that has been missing perhaps is that recruiters, and also salespeople perhaps have spent a lot of time really customizing the template as if to not make it look like a template, right? Right. So spending the time actually trying to trick the candidate to think that you're actually sending them a direct email that you know about them. And you're making a lot of assumptions, to your point, about you think you know about them, versus what about giving them a little more insight into the actual job, or explaining why the job is relevant or a better fit for them, or what the real opportunity is. Like, we haven't done a very good job of explaining that. Right. Versus targeting our messaging, maybe, I see you like the Huskies or whatever. So, I guess, where does authenticity play in that in terms of the actual approach? Is it about customizing the email template to the person based on the icebreaker on their LinkedIn? Or is it about explaining why something's a great place to work, or, a great opportunity for them?
It's the perennial $1 million question, isn't it? That's such a great example that you offered, right? With all of the enrichment tools, those aforementioned toolboxes, it's become easier. I won't say it's easy for recruiters, but it's become easier to kind of aggregate the insights and say, I can create a really tailored message to this person. And recruiters sometimes labor over this. And it misses the target, or they don't get a response, or the response sits in the candidate's mailbox, though it was read, and that person's going to return to it at a later time. To the recruiter, it all feels like defeat. There's that deflatedness. Where the authenticity comes into play is really a recruiter framing their mind to what's truly in this message I'm about to create and send to this candidate. Like, what can I offer them that is distinct, that is differentiated, and from what I can infer, of value to them? And I think where recruiters, I won't say are wrong, but sometimes misstep, is thinking too much like, I know some incredible things about this exceptional client of ours, and I'm so excited. I want to explain the top 2 to 3 bullet points about the role. That's really going to attract and engage this candidate to want to talk with me. But how do we know the priorities of that person? How do we know what really flips their light switch? What kind of challenges they would consider disembarking from their own company to take on, right? So that again, bringing this back to authenticity, I believe it actually starts in putting oneself into the mindset of, if I were to receive this message as a candidate, what differentiated value would I see in this message to make me feel inclined to respond and want to have a conversation?
Because every recruiter using a similar template, using the same 2 bullet points for all of the SDR jobs out there, or all the marketing manager jobs out there, those messages are going to look pretty similar, even if we do try to customize our outreach. Yeah, that's I think it almost gets to that topic of storytelling, right? In terms of recruiters being storytellers and um, how do you engage with candidates? How do you engage with clients in that kind of more meaningful conversation, if you will? So that's something that we think a lot about here at Honeit in terms of the conversations recruiters have with hiring managers, those kickoff calls you were talking about. What part of every recruiter's process? What are you doing with all of the great things that the hiring manager told you about this amazing job? We're actually starting to see people bake in some of those insights into their outreach, which is pretty exciting. And that kind of, to your point, goes beyond the recruiter trying to come up with the pitch or come up with what's exciting and actually just leverage what they were able to extract out of the hiring manager to tell them what's the real excitement about this job or company or why now or the team, right? All of those great things that we heard during that kickoff call. So actually being able to apply or share what the hiring manager said about this particular open job. Have you seen any applications of that, or are you dabbling with that at all?
We are in our own ways. And actually I want to back up and park on what you just shared, because I think it's so important that the reality is recruiters are storytellers. We're storytellers, marketers, storytellers, whatever definition you want to give us, we're storytellers. And we're translating in a relevant way the impact, the opportunity of that client and that client's opportunity and that client's mission to hopefully ready and willing talent at the end of the day. And, resources, tools like Honeit empower that, because rather than, and you said this a moment ago, rather than telling, right, show. So, and any opportunity that a recruiter can show or convey a resource that's directly from the client side is going to further build that authenticity, transparency, and a trust-based relationship with the talent, right? Because let's be frank, it's been decades that recruiters have been telling what's great about a company, why a candidate should join, why they think. It's all from the perspective of a recruiter in that sense. Mm-hmm. But if a recruiter can facilitate the discovery of information and insights and help convey over more and show, that's going to be the difference maker. And that's where Honeit is really a differentiated solution in this case. So I guess kind of back to what you asked, are we doing that type of thing here? Yes, in our own way, but actually it makes me think even more deeply about how can we leverage Honeit for some of the things that we're doing.
Well, happy to chat about that again. But yeah, I think you're right, that the storytelling piece. And you're right. We have a client, Honeit customer, Robin Walters from Rogue Recruitment. She's an incredible boutique recruiting firm. And she just told us about how on the last podcast, how she made a record-breaking month after just a few weeks using Honeit. Why? Because she was standing out to candidates and she was differentiating and standing out to clients in what she provided to them in terms of value or paying it forward or giving first before asking. So many times recruiters are saying, hey, give me 20 minutes of your time, candidate, for me to tell you about this job that may or may not be actually interesting. And, that candidate gets that message from 10, 20 recruiters. And who do you talk to? Which recruiter is worth your time, right? Well, she was able to share a few insights from her kickoff calls from hiring managers and get passive candidates who are happy in their job to go, oh, this does sound like an awesome opportunity. And this does sound like a hiring manager that I would love working with and I could relate to, right? And it was just enough to make it easy on the candidate to hear that enthusiasm, personality, communication style of that hiring manager about the job in 25 seconds. To get them to say, yeah, Robin's a recruiter worth speaking with. And it was as simple as that. It was as simple as, don't take my word for it. I'm working on this amazing role. Here's a chance to invest a minute to listen to a couple of highlights and see if you like it. And then again, what that does is you reduce the chance for drop off downstream, or that personalities will conflict later in the interview cycles, which doesn't look good for recruiters, right? You have candidates withdraw once they meet the hiring manager. So we're actually help getting the right candidates on the phone faster, rather than spending time talking to people who aren't going to mesh well or aren't going to be that fit with a potential hiring team. So that was pretty exciting to hear how she was simply just one little link could get that person not actively looking to pick up their head and return their call.
That's a great incremental success story. And I hope Robin continues to have successes like that with Honeit. And if I may ask, don't you think that a recruiter giving something initially is just a humble way to start to build that bridge of trust with a potential candidate? And when I say giving something, rather than be pitch forward and try to talk about the merits of the role right off the bat, say, hey, I'd like to offer you an opportunity. I'd like to provide you an opportunity to hear it for yourself. It's sort of like, hey, I'm putting my defenses on pause here, actually giving the candidate a chance to come toward the recruiter. I feel that that's a very humble approach, and one that can foster trust, in a shorter timeline.
I think give before ask is like Gary Vaynerchuk wrote a book about it. Like it's give, right? Punch, jab, or whatever the euphemism is. But another example, Michael G. Cox, we had a call with him as well, and he talked about when things were slow. In the last years, things have been up and down for agencies, and it's been a tough time. If recs freeze up and you don't have active recs, what do? He was out there talking to candidates still, even though he didn't have jobs for them, giving them advice on helping them with their resume, giving them some LinkedIn search strategies, doing this stuff to help candidates pay it forward. And then what happens? They finally get their job. Who's the recruiter they think about reaching out to help them fill jobs on their team once they do land that job? Mike, right? And so, he shared this wonderful example of like, what can you do to help? It's funny. A lot of candidates think it's the recruiter's job to find them a job, but actually, the recruiter's working for the client, helping them find a candidate. They're the ones who's paying. But Mike flipped the switch and was actually like, what if I do invest time and almost act as if I'm representing candidates, helping them find jobs and coaching them? And then sure enough, that led to clients to date that's keeping him busy. He's full of recs and busy as ever. So yeah, I think you're right. I think whenever a recruiter can give first, it's a really great way to stand up, both to candidates and to clients.
Agree.
What maybe you could talk a little bit about and when you mentioned that it's the recruiters who kind of curate or tease out or are able to kind of extract, because whether they're the salesperson or whatnot or the storyteller, I think that's where we talk about recruiters not being replaced, and there's a reason and a purpose for the role and profession. And even with the influx of automation and AI and all this doom and gloom around recruitment, curious to get your thoughts on that role of the recruiter having that conversation with the hiring manager for the intake call, or having those conversations with candidates. Like, does that go away? Does AI replace that? Do chatbots replace that? Or is it the human conversation that will remain? That's what I hope, at least.
Yeah, this is a deep conversation to be had for sure. And I think that this is something that will be continue to be, and will be perhaps even more so on the minds of recruiting leaders and experienced recruiters in the year to come. Because, if we just could take a snapshot and do a little bit of social listening on one of the major grievances or gripes from the recruiting industry in the last year, I think still close to the top would be the rote nature of intake calls and how to enhance those, right? Is it a pain point of getting the hiring decision maker on to the call in the first place? Is it that they do it in a perfunctory way and it's just sort of checkboxing, making sure they get all the must-have details? Well, if that's the baseline, there's so much potential to enrich and augment those intake calls. And it's on the shoulders of each and every recruiter, account manager to do that. That's my belief. Because if we put ourselves in the mindset, the framing of a hiring decision maker, they're carving out 20, 30, 45 minutes of their day. They're busy putting fires out left and right. They have a talent challenge, which is why they're engaged with the recruiter in the first place. They've got their personal lives. They've got reporting up to their leaders to be responsible. Their plate's full. So can we blame them for being in the posture of like trying to get the facts over and sort of offload their plate with the talent challenge? That's the responsibility of the recruiter. After all, they are going to find and engage with the best talent and present them to the hiring manager. Okay, so I feel like I've worn the rubber off that tire. The reason I believe that there's so much responsibility on each and every recruiter and potential is because we need to bridge that gap between what the talent of today is seeking and what the hiring decision makers can really talk about. And I mean really talk about, not just the must-have technical skills and a potpourri of soft skills, but like what makes your team a great team to be part of? Why are you, the hiring decision maker, an exceptional leader? Where have you fallen short as a leader? What's a challenge that you overcame in the last calendar year that you're proud of and helped your team advance toward your goals? These are the kind of deeper probing questions that evoke the reality of that team, that leader, that company, and can be, like we talked about earlier, conveyed to today's talent who are hungry for the deeper insights, right? Not just a reprise of the job description bullet points, but like, what would it truly be like if I were to join this team? Would I like this leader? Would I feel like I'm on a purposeful mission being part of this company? Is the company going somewhere? So the recruiter's role in all of this is to know the client well, know the hiring decision makers and hiring stakeholders well enough where during that intake call, think of it more like a conversation, less like an interview. Of course, get the key technical points and soft skills, of course, fundamentally do that, then go deeper. I know some exceptional recruiters and recruiting leaders who do this. They ask those next tough questions. They ask those probing questions. And because they do that, they're able to transform those insights into truthful, authentic, compelling stories tailored to each individual candidate who they speak with. And to bring this full circle, rather than just telling, being able to show or demonstrate or leverage captured content insights. It could be video, voice. That is the ultimate. That's the ultimate resource for a recruiter to have. And Honeit does that. Honeit is that enablement for recruiters to be able to go through that. All said.
I had you on mute because I was just listening, because that what you were saying was so just spot on with some of the gaps, right, in our day to day. And I think you're right. I think the ability, even getting a recruiter to be able to repitch or re-explain those extracted insights from an intake call succinctly, without misinterpretation or miscommunication, to other people, right? An account manager explaining the job to the recruiter and to the sourcer and to the recruiting agency owner about why this rec is a priority. Like, that's usually that person's take on what was just told to them, right? And they have to then re-explain to why this is a top rec. Just like they would have to re-explain to the candidate why the team is amazing, why the problem they're solving is big, why now's a great time to. So I think you're right. Even being able to succinctly do that is hard and probably sets a lot of recruiters apart. If they could go one step further and actually explain it with zero misinterpretation, zero miscommunication, right from the horse's mouth, right? That's what we get excited about, because that's where you're right. You get the storytelling, and then you get kind of that authentic. It's that authentic recruitment communication, authentic insights. What do you call that? What do you call that?
It's a good placeholder label for it, at least.
Yeah.
And I think, to speak into what you just shared, it's also giving recruiters more dimension and flexibility, because it's not just engage, it's attract and then engage. And there's trust being built in these incremental micro stages all along the process. I mean, let's not delude ourselves to think that if a potential candidate responds to an email like, oh, they must have implicit trust. No, it's going to be earned from that first outreach to a call, and then within that call to whatever the next step is going to be, and blah, blah, blah. So a resource like Honeit is giving flexibility to recruiters to be able to do the attract and engage piece really, really well, and other parts along the candidate experience. But, we have to meet people where they're at in terms of passive or even active job seekers. What I mean by this is there hesitation to engage with a recruiter because they've been burned in the past by sales forward recruiting conversations where it's just push, 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 roll, roll, roll. Well, then in that particular potential candidate's case, having an excerpt of an intake call shared over in advance could be the difference maker, where they say, I'll agree to a conversation with you because now I have peace of mind that this is a real thing. It's transparent. I'm not just going to be preyed upon by the recruiter. And you can take the inverse of that too. Maybe the candidate is passive, but they're still very open-minded, and, all recruiter calls accepted, and they just jump on recruiter calls and see who's got the, best pitch of the week. Well, being differentiated and having that resource, the audio snippet, images, real content, real meaty, value-adding content from the client side. Now, what a way to stand out and be unique among peers in this industry.
I think you're right. And I think external recruiters or agencies have always had a bit of an extra challenge at getting a candidate's attention, right? We've seen internal talent partners. If you work at Facebook and you're a recruiter at Facebook and you message a candidate about a job at Facebook, that's a pretty clear and direct line, a path for a candidate if they're interested in Facebook. If you're an agency, right, perhaps working with Facebook, but can't talk about the client until you get the person to respond, like you've got all sorts of obstacles about how do you actually build trust with the candidate so that they believe you're really working with Facebook, right? If that's your potential client. I mean, there's the debate around, do you expose the client name on the first outreach in fear of the candidate going around? So many recruiters shy. I'm on the lines of, if you work with good clients and you're working with potentially good candidates, that might happen. But if you want a better response rate, like, let's talk about the opportunity sooner in the process. But, I think that's where we're also seeing a shift to RPOs starting to take away some of that business from external agencies, because they're saying, look, we'll still do the service and find you great candidates, but hey, give us an email. We'll look and feel like an internal recruiter within your organization, create a seamless candidate experience. And then you can use the logo and you're not competing on commissions with other agencies and things like that. So I think that's partially one of the reasons we're seeing the RPO model take off in a way, is that, it might be a bit more attractive to candidates. I was going to show you, Trevor, just a couple of examples that we've seen with our customers and like how they're actually doing what we're talking about. Let me just share my screen and I'll just show you what we're seeing. So one customer, Treasury 4, this is a kickoff call with Scott, the senior engineering manager, like an engineering lead. And this is a great kickoff call in terms of why he's hiring other engineers or why they're hiring other senior engineers, right? And actually, since Scott has been promoted to more of a lead or manager. But these were the highlights from the kickoff call where he talked about what he was doing before and why he took the job at Treasury 4, right? And talks about the culture of ownership, and talks about mentorship for junior engineers, really strong in the company, and why it's an exciting time to join the company, right? And this is a link that we can share with candidates or put in our in-mails or our outbound communications to get candidates to understand that this is a great place to work, right? Similarly, if you're hiring, you could put multiple people on the hiring team on a link and give candidates a chance to meet the hiring team, right? This is with the CTO, with Scott, and another engineering lead, V, right? And V talks about how she was recently promoted and how there's a good culture of internal mobility within the organization that they promote within. What candidate doesn't want to hear that they take one job, there's an opportunity for growth and pathways. So really great storytelling. And again, it's not us, it's not the recruiter. It's coming right from the great question, to your point. The recruiter is the interviewer is the curator, knowing how to ask the right good question to get that great response, right? Similarly, you can, if you're interviewing for product managers, talk to the head of the product management boss. Ask them why product management is important. And the thing that's exciting here is when you create this amazing content, you're one click away to then go to market, right? And here's an example of just taking that link, those job insights that you captured and curated, putting them in a post or putting them in an email to say, hey, here's an amazing opportunity, but don't take my word for it. Here's a link to get to know the hiring team. And if a candidate's busy and not looking, they can still hear why Treasury 4 is an awesome place to work. And some companies are taking it one step further. You could interview the founder, the CEO, you could interview the investor, you can interview all of the co-founders and give it a real, and when you're doing executive recruitment, give those VP prospective candidates a chance to meet the leadership team. And this is, again, another way to kind of give and explain, without telling or asking for 30 minutes of the candidate's time to explain that on a phone call. So just wanted to show a couple of examples of like how we're seeing this in action with our customers.
I'm marveling here, Nick, because I've seen here and there pieces of this, and you just brought it together in such a comprehensive way. Can I highlight a couple of things that really stood out to me in looking at those screen shares? First and foremost, it pulls the veil right off of this whole secrecy, challenge that the recruiting industry might perpetually face, but has faced forever. Like, how much do we share, and at what intervals? So, there are going to be different perspectives on that, and I respect it, and that's fine. But it affords the candidate the opportunity to see what the partnership is all about, and get that in a nice curated way initially, and then decide, is this something that they want to engage in and pursue more knowledge about and learn more about? So first and foremost, I love that there's that transparency. It's demonstrating a partnership between agency and the client. It's really neat that it involves social engagement, that the bios are there. I mean, there's even links to LinkedIn profiles. I think that's really doing a great deal to bridge that transparency, authenticity, and trust. And I had a question. Maybe you could speak into this a little bit, because I think I know, but it looks like there are a lot of verbal, like audio recording, and then copy beneath it, like text resources. How does Honeit enable recruiters in doing that? Because that seems like it'd be a lot of work.
Well, there you go. That's a great question. So that's the Honeit software. That's the platform. So it automatically does all of this for you. So you just get to focus on having a great phone call or video call. You can use call guides within the solution. And so you can create an intake call guide versus an interview guide versus an exit interview guide, right? Whatever the conversation is you're having with the person. And then that's how you create those fair, structured, consistent, compliant conversations and keeping the process fair. So in the system, it's just as you talk to someone and ask them, hey, tell me about why this job's open, you click a button. And what that does, it automatically captures the audio answer, it automatically transcribes the answer, and it automatically summarizes the answer. And then at the end of the call, after you hang up the phone, it just takes a couple of seconds to pick which of those great answers you might want to package and share with other folks internally, because this is also good just for alignment within the hiring team or within the recruitment team and the sourcing team to see what's important and why the job's open. So some of this can be just shared internally for calibration and alignment. And then you could create another link that might be your go-to-market, your outbound that you equip the sourcers, the recruiting team with to say, hey, pass this link along to prospective candidates, or embed this link in your job descriptions. So again, the technology does all of this for you, it really frees up the recruiter to just focus on having a great conversation and listening and, engaging in the conversation.
It's awesome. I appreciate you informing me and expanding my view on it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting where we've been looking at interviews, phone screens, intake calls, exit interviews as data, right? And the system creates this structured data. Well, now if you have all of this amazing structured data from all of your interviews or phone screens or conversations, new applications of AI get very interesting, right? Where you can actually apply some AI to structured data. I think the disconnect is going to be where the recruiters are going to be left behind are the folks that don't have data in which to apply AI, right? And so all of these 10x improvements in terms of productivity and innovation and things you can do with AI, there's going to be people that have data you apply that to, or there's going to be people that don't have data you can apply that type of to. And that's going to give that advantage, whether it's recruiting, whether it's marketing, whether it's whatever application or flavor of AI we're talking about. It's the folks with data sets or unique data sets applying AI to that data sets are going to give them that advantage. Well, full circle back here. I know we're getting close. We've almost run out of time, but Trevor, what are some closing thoughts here? I mean, I think the themes then, and what gets me excited is to think that there's still a place for the recruiter, right? The role of the recruiter is still an important role if you're hiring, or at the role of human resources and people in HR is still important if you're talking about retention and mobility and some of those things that we like to talk about too. So the role of the human is still there. And then I think the other theme we're talking about is that authenticity or authentic communication. And when you start to think about all the conversations a recruiter has, whether it's the intake call that we talked about today, the phone screen, the reference call, the negotiation call, the onboarding call, right? Those conversations are data as well. And I think it's how do we as recruiters combine that human touch, that high level, high touch interaction with that of storytelling and data to make better decisions or equip our clients to make better decisions and hire the right people?
It's a really good question and a deep one, and keeping it high elevation for now. I think because we could explore this in the other conversations. It's up to recruiters at the end of the day, and a well-worn phrase, but at the end of the day, we each need to live up to that exclamation that AI is not going to replace the human element. Okay, so let's live up to that standard and be thoughtful about our sourcing and planning outreach, and then the actual outreach and the use of tools, whether that be automation or copyright augmentation, what have you. Be thoughtful about the candidate experience. So really be thoughtful about the entire journey of recruitment and think, well, what can I bring that only a human can provide? Is it personalization? Is it empathy? Is it an insight that I think can benefit this person but has no inherent, benefit to me? So there's a lot to unpack there. And then also there's the reality that getting a little bit lost in my train of thought here. Well, I think maybe this is a good moment to say vulnerability, just not being afraid to tell the truth to candidates, to be forthcoming and to let them know when things are not exactly as they seem or going in a different direction for them, because that is another, discernible element about being a person. So may have been a little bit wobbly with my thought at the end there, but those are the two things that come to mind.
I always enjoy hearing how you talk about this, because you've got such a great lens and breadth of experience in our field. And now having that kind of marketing view, I think that's a very unique view to think about. Like, how do we grow our client base? How do we get candidates to respond? I mean, you're thinking about these things that many recruiters want to think about, but maybe just don't have the time to think about, right? Or the bandwidth to think about if they're managing recs. Well, you've got this kind of new opportunity to think about strategy and differentiation, which I think is what all recruiters want. Just try to find that time and or functionality or technology or innovation to be able to do some of these things we think about. So, Trevor, thank you so much for joining us. You're full of wisdom and full of great storytelling yourself. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Trevor Gamble. Thanks for joining the Honeit podcast. Talk soon.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.